there, soulmates. Plenty to discuss on this Wednesday. We're following the latest on the governor accused of busing migrants to Black-led cities only and the push to raise awareness about foster care. Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte, plus what Black Americans are turning to in order to help save at the grocery store and the new housing options available for those in Atlanta. They're the stories that impact our people.
We're going to bring you our news, our views, and our voice. So topping our conversation today, let's go to Memphis, where a man faces charges for firing into a local Fox TV station. Police have identified him as 26-year-old Jared Nathan. Investigators say Nathan walked up to Fox 13's front door Tuesday carrying an AR-style assault rifle. He then fired one shot through the door, but thankfully no one was hurt. Police say Nathan then barricaded himself at a nearby business and went live on Facebook before turning himself over to police.
I need to talk to the news people. I need to talk to the news people. I got some information I need to get let out. I need to talk to the news people. I got some information. I got some information that need to get across the world. That got me surrounded. I'm not doing shit. I'm not doing shit. I need one of y'all to come here now. I ain't sliding shit out. I ain't sliding shit out. And I got backup on the way.
The shooter is said to have been having, quote, a mental health episode. We'll definitely continue to follow this story and provide updates as the news develops. What a scary scenario.
Absolutely
there.
Frightening, you know, and you know, we've had our emergency training here at this station, and you know, it's just a reminder of this epidemic of gun violence. And when people who have mental health issues get a hold of guns, none of us are safe. None of us are safe. And you know, we can't go to a movie theater, we can't go to church, to a grocery store, and even just coming to work at a news station to share information with people. And so it is absolutely frightening, and it's a miracle that nobody was hurt.
Yeah, and you know, coincidentally, it happens to be, May happens to be Mental Health Awareness Month, and this leads to even more credence that, you know, mental health episodes and situations and guns, you know, do not go, you know, hand in hand. And, you know, tapping into a story like this, hopefully, you know, the policymakers, the lawmakers, the folks who, you know, are on the other side of the argument will see that this is really an epidemic. You know, even the medical industry is calling, you know, this an epidemic with the number of gunshot wounds and the number of people that we are losing due to situations like this. Thankfully, as we said earlier, no one was hurt in this incident, but it could have been much, much worse.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go to Nicordelai with this story, yes?
Well, Sayreville Councilwoman Eunice Dumfour was a devoted mother, a dedicated pastor, and a committed public servant. But on February 1st, she was shot outside her home, and her family is calling for justice. The case is under investigation, but few details have been released. Her death has reverberated across continents and raised questions about politics, religion, and money. Dumfour's role in Christian ministry and her church's financial disputes have added complexity to the case. As the first Black councilwoman in Sayreville, her family fears that her death may be forgotten or ignored.
Well, that's why it's so important that, you know, our newscast here at Fox Soul's Black Report, you know, stays on top of stories like this, bringing people information for stories that either don't make the headlines or very quickly fall from the headlines, or just stay kind of right under the headlines. We were just talking earlier about how important it is to stay on cases like Shaquilla Robinson, whose family is still seeking justice. And here lies another case that needs that kind of voice, that needs this kind of platform as well.
Yeah, and we know that local authorities there are not saying much right now, you know, but we know that Ms. Dumfour, Councilwoman Dumfour, was involved with a campaign for City Council that really sort of threw the Democratic majority of the council into it being sort of split 3-3, right? And so who knows if, you know, there's somebody out there who has some business pending before the city that may have had some malintent directed towards her. Who knows? But this was somebody that was beloved in the community. This is somebody who was so young and had had such a future ahead of her, and there are kids now without a mom.
Yeah.
There's a new husband who is now a widow, and so this is just a really sad story.
It is. We'll have to continue to follow up on that. Let's go to Minneapolis, where police officer Tu Thao was found guilty of aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter in the killing of George Floyd. In 2020, Thao kept bystanders away while his fellow officer, Derek Chauvin, held his knee on Floyd's neck for 9 minutes, leading to Floyd's death. Thao's guilty verdict was the last of both state and federal trials for the former officer involved in Floyd's death. Thao faces a state sentencing set for August the 7th and could face between 41 and 57 months behind bars.
I thought it was really amazing that in this verdict, the judge says that Thao made a conscious decision to actively participate in Floyd's death. He held back the concerned bystanders and even prevented an off-duty Minneapolis firefighter from rendering medical aid to Floyd, who desperately needed it. Hopefully, this verdict sends a message to police officers across the country that even if you are a so-called, bystander, and if you fail to do your duty, if you fail to render aid, if somebody is doing something that violates, their oath as officers to protect and serve all of us, then you're going to be held accountable. And so, the only thing that's sad about this is that it's only 41 to 57 months that he'll be serving for this, and that's assuming that he doesn't get time served.
Yeah, and a part of his defense was, hey, I just left training, I didn't know, but if you go back to that horrific video, you actually see Thao standing there with his hands in his pocket as he watched this horrific incident happen, and the judge wasn't buying it. He said, yes, you are just as responsible, and therefore he'll be serving those months in prison.
Well, New York City Mayor Eric Adams is calling out Texas Governor Greg Abbott's decision to resume busing migrants to the Big Apple. He accuses the governor of targeting cities led by black mayors.
Governor Abbott sent asylum seekers to New York, black mayor, to Washington, black mayor, to Houston, black mayor, to Los Angeles, black mayor, to Denver, black mayor. He passed over thousands of cities to land here. I cannot ignore the fact that Governor Abbott sent migrants only to cities with their black mayors.
Adams called Abbott's actions morally bankrupt and devoid of any concern for the well-being of asylum seekers, and urged the federal government to step in and provide support. Abbott defended the decision, stating that Texas will continue the necessary program until President Biden secures the border to stop the inflow of mass migration. The surge of asylum seekers is expected to increase in New York City once Title 42 is lifted on May 11th.
So what do you take of this? Do you think purpose, intentional, or do you think just happenstance? The mayors just happen to be black? You've got some people saying, well, maybe, they just happen to be black mayors.
Yeah, I think it's pretty targeted. I think this tracks for Governor
what do we
Greg
say? I'm
Abbott.
trying to play devil's advocate.
Right. Well, I don't know. The devil don't need no advocate here because the devil's busy.
Exactly.
I think this is intentional, and what a shame. Asylum seekers, asylum is a human right, right? These are folks that are fleeing religious persecution, political persecution in their home countries, and it's a human right, and the fact that they are being treated like political pawns by folks like Governor Abbott at the border, that they're being sent thousands of miles away from the border, and to make a political point? I think Mayor Adams, like so many others, are saying, hey, federal government, we all need you to really do something about immigration reform. It's been a talking point for too long, and we have not fixed our system. And one place where we might want to start, if we can't find agreement in other areas, is the asylum system.
Well, how do they forget that their ancestors as well came over seeking a better life You know, how do you forget that? They make this wonderful, beautiful story of Ellis Island, you know, but those folks were seeking asylum. Those folks were seeking a better life from their countries over in Germany and all the other parts of Europe when they came to the United States. My great-grandfather happened to come over through Ellis Island, which is a very rare occurrence, saying as though he was a black West Indian. So there are those stories as well. But Mr. Abbott, let's dip back into your ancestry and let's talk about why your people came from where they came from to come to America for a better life, and they were granted that access. They were granted those pleasures, if you will, of being able to tap into what America was doing back in those days and be a part of it. So, you know, why is it so difficult for you know, everybody else? You know, we'll fast forward to today. What's happening here?
You're right.
Yeah. All right. According to a new analysis of traffic data and court records, black drivers in Florida are nearly 3 times more likely to be ticketed by police and sheriff deputies under a new law that allowed enforcement to cite drivers for loud music starting last year. Now, the analysis showed that black drivers received almost 37% more tickets, despite black people making up only 16% of Florida's driving eligible population. Now, law enforcement cited black drivers at a rate of just over 11 tickets per 100,000 black drivers and cited white drivers at a rate of 3.9 tickets per 100 white drivers. Driving while black. How long have we been using that catchphrase?
Driving while black, doing everything while black. And you know, a really important point was made by the folks that are fighting this new law that Governor DeSantis signed into law just a year ago. They're fighting it because it's very subjective. You know, it's not like these police officers are using a sound measuring device in the same way that if we were speeding down a highway, they'd be using, you know, a device to track our speed on the road. And so the fact that it's so subjective and that it seems to be so targeted, right? And we're already seeing, you know, in the first year since this law has gone into action, that it's disproportionately impacting black folks. I have a feeling that that is not a complete surprise. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah, and you know, back with DeSantis and in Florida, that's what makes him so much more dangerous as a potential presidential candidate. Because not only, you know, do you have, you know, the Trump rhetoric and maybe the Trump way of sort of kind of thinking, but his doing is different because he's educated and, you know, he knows the law. And it's not necessarily coming from a place of ignorance where he's just popping off at the mouth, which in my opinion makes DeSantis very dangerous because he knows all the loopholes and the ups and downs that he can take to push this really off agenda, if you will. So you got to keep your eye on him for sure, and others.
Yeah. And at some point, even after he leaves office, he's going to leave a whole lot of mess for whoever comes after him.
For sure.
President Joe Biden has commuted the sentences of 31 people convicted of nonviolent drug crimes who were serving time in home confinement. Many of the convicts would have received a lower sentence if charged today because of changes in laws. The commutations were part of a broader set of policy actions announced by the White House across 20 different agencies meant to improve the criminal justice system, which disproportionately affects, guess what, black and other non-white communities. The actions include expanding access to health care, affordable housing, and education, as well as making it easier for those with criminal records to find jobs, higher education, and voting rights.
So we talked a little bit about, you know, Biden and him wanting to be our president yet again. And has he made good on these promises that black voters in particular are sort of kind of, some are questioning him on. We talked about, you know, how we have a sister in the highest court of America. We have a sister as his VP. Is this him trying to hurry up and make good on some of the promises, you think?
Well, I mean, I think so, and you know, you have to take my word for it. I mean, look at his record. The fact that he's commuted the sentences of now 75 other people, and we can't forget that he pardoned thousands who were convicted of simple possession of marijuana under federal law, right? And so, you know, that is more than just a down payment. That is delivering on one of his campaign promises, and that's going to make a difference in the lives of folks. I mean, how many people do we have in our families? How many folks do we have in our communities, you know, who have gotten tied up in the criminal justice system because of simple drug possession of marijuana, you know, or, you know, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so the fact that laws have changed and this president is trying to accelerate that change, I think it's a good thing for him. I think black folks are paying attention.
And maybe it's a better late than never, or what is that old black adage, Johnny come lately? So it seems like he's getting the job done.
Looks like Joe's coming on time.
Yeah, man. All right, the Supreme Court is under scrutiny for potential ethical violations, calling its future into question. The Just Majority Coalition is working to protect democracy and advocate for expanding the number of justices on the court. The organization believes expanding the court would lead to fairness and justice and ensure that justices set aside their personal and political beliefs when making decisions that affect us all, right? Proponents argue that the court needs critical reform and that expanding the court and implementing reforms for diverse representation on the bench would lead to a more just and equitable society.
Senate Republicans blocked the Equal Rights Amendment from being revived, denying a decades-long push to amend the Constitution and end discrimination based on sex. Democrats failed to obtain the necessary 60 votes, with only 2 Republicans supporting the resolution. The vote came after Virginia lawmakers voted to ratify the amendment 3 years ago, becoming the 38th state and final state needed. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer vowed to keep trying to pass the measure, especially after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Republicans argued that Democrats were attempting to rewrite history and drive a political wedge.
I mean, really? Are we still talking about equal rights for? Well, yeah, we are. I can, now that I think about it, sure. I mean, when you talk about, you would think that this world, or this country rather, world, has progressed in a way where, we can all live, according to our beliefs, and according to, the way we see ourselves, in peace, and to be able to practice that. Really, that's what America, I was just speaking to that, that's what America was based on. And, folks were prosecuted and killed for what they believed and how they practiced and lived their lives. And I just can't believe that in 2023, we are still looking at legislation that allows me to be equal and whole, as a woman.
Well, I think the country has progressed. I think who hasn't progressed are members of Congress, i.e. the United States Senate here. I think who hasn't progressed are people sitting on the U.S. Supreme Court. And so I think that's why so many folks are calling for reforms to expand the court and to make sure that, our Supreme Court justices have to adhere to higher ethical standards, so you don't got people purchasing the houses of the mamas of Supreme Court justices.
But if those are the people that we put in place to lead us and guide us and direct us, then I don't think that we have progressed.
Well, I think they're disconnected from the people. And I think that's part of the problem.
Well, that's why we got to pay attention to these votings and their agendas and platforms.
That's right.
All right, let's move on here. Actor Isaiah Washington shared on IG that some of the best elementary school teachers, these are his words, and neighbors he had during his childhood in the South were members of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, in the post, which included a photo of what appeared to be 3 generations of KKK members, Washington said that while he experienced racial prejudice during his childhood, he and his classmates still played together and visit each other's homes, but the racial boundaries were clear. Washington also pondered if his own family's goodwill towards the community had a positive effect on his classmates' outlook on him and his success as an entertainer. The post was initially removed from Instagram, but has since been reposted. Lord have mercy.
Well, I mean, I just wonder, why did he post that photo? Clearly it was to get some shock value. But when you read the story, when you read about his experience, it's an interesting experience. It's not the experience of my mom, who grew up in the Jim Crow South, but that may be the experience of Isaiah Washington and others. But it seemed at first almost like a public service announcement for the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, because you're responsible for how you deliver the messages. You are responsible for the message and the energy that you bring. And even though there might be a little something to it, and people might be able to identify the way he brings the message, and then he's so suspect with his track record, as of late. One minute he's retired, the next minute you see him as the mayor of Chucalissa in P Valley. So, what is it, Isaiah? So, I don't know. I just think it's the way he delivered the message, and then we have a tendency to take things out of context. But it just didn't sit well with a lot of folks.
I'm not sure if it would sit well with the mayor of Chickaloosa either. Coming up, buy your groceries now and paying for them later. Good idea or a setup for failure?
We'll tell you all about the new methods Black Americans are using to save a few dollars and afford food for the family. You're watching FOXSOUL's Black Report. Hey, Soulmates, we welcome you back to FOXSOUL's Black Report. Lots going on this month of May. It is also National Foster Care Month, and it is crucial to address the lack of support of Black and LGBTQ plus caregivers for foster youth here in the U.S.
That's right. Experts say foster youth of color who are LGBTQ face higher rates of abuse and maltreatment from caregivers due to racism, homophobia, and transphobia, and that it's important to recruit more caregivers of color who are also LGBTQ to ensure that youth feel safe and supported in their homes and while navigating the child welfare system. I couldn't agree more. I serve on the board of the National Foster Youth Institute. I credit, now Mayor Karen Bass for getting me interested in those issues.
What got you interested?
Well, I mean,
because we know you come from, you don't come from the system, if you will.
Yeah.
So what motivated you? What got you interested?
I mean, really, it was Karen Bass's passion around foster care and advancing the causes of foster youth when in the California State Legislature. I didn't know a lot about those issues, but I knew a lot about the need for education reform and criminal justice reform, and a lot of folks that are on the front lines of what's not working in the systems that touch our everyday lives, including healthcare, are foster youth.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to change those systems, start with making that change for foster youth, and it will help and benefit all of us.
Yeah, I think for the culture, it's also starting to bust up, if you will, those stereotypes, that we often run into it here when welcoming a foster child into our homes. So I think it starts there too, when we talk about the front lines.
And oftentimes it's Black, Latino, and LGBTQ foster youth that are the last to be adopted. Yeah. And so hopefully this month, as we bring awareness, more people might take a second look.
Yeah, and some resources. Let's go to DC-based nonprofit Think of Us. They've received $47.5 million in funding committed to develop a better child welfare system for foster youth in the U.S. The 5-year funding provided by the Audacious Project will be used to gather data on the issues facing foster youth and to work with state agencies and policymakers to create federal change. The nonprofit will also expand its outreach and direct services arm to get resources into the hands of foster youth. Founder and CEO Sixto Cancel, who spent his childhood and young adulthood in the foster system, said he hoped to use technology to improve the system, which has remained unchanged since the 1980s and 90s, to our point that we just made.
Yeah, and it's so good that what's so great about what Sixto Cancel is doing, and he's an advocate that's very well respected in the space. What's so great about what he's doing is that he is making sure that foster youth like him, who've been in the system, right, are at the table and sharing their lived experience to help to build solutions, right? That is very much tied into the mission of the National Foster Youth Institute and very much needed. Well, as the cost of the groceries in the U.S. have risen by 8.4% this year, more Americans are using buy now, pay later apps like Afterpay and Klarna and PayPal to pay for everyday items like groceries. Due to inflation, almost half of Americans have used installment loan apps, and of those, about 1 in 5 use them to buy groceries. However, the convenience and accessibility of buy now, pay later loans can cause problems for consumers who may fall behind on payments, especially for Black and Hispanic users who are more likely to already be in financial distress. Despite this, the industry deems itself as a more flexible and consumer-friendly alternative to traditional credit cards.
If you can keep up with it and not fall behind, and read between the lines. I mean, sometimes those interests and those other, small requirements will come and haunt you. I know PayPal has a good program that I've used in the past, where it's, pay in 4 payments, where you're already in PayPal's system, and all your cards and your bank accounts are linked. And when they see that you have, ongoing deposits, they'll extend you that line of credit. Well, they'll pay for the product up front, and then you pay them in installments. I know that helps out a lot. So maybe a more sure-footed program like that. But you really have to be careful. I know here in Detroit, and really in urban cities, urban areas of cities across the country, those payday loans have really come under fire because of how caught up people get and how unfair and unjust they have a tendency to be. So you really have to be careful.
That's right.
I know you need the help. We need the help, but you still have to be careful, because you will be caught up paying for a carton of eggs for 10 years.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also a reminder that there are so many economic indicators in terms of the health of the economy. And right now, like, we have record low black unemployment at 5%. It's never been lower. But this is another indicator that doesn't make the headlines very often, right? How are people actually paying for their groceries? We learned this morning in our editorial meeting, that the 99-cent store is now the $1.29 store.
Yes, it is.
Because of inflation, and that impacts everyday people. And so
and these benefits going away don't make it any better. These SNAP benefits
the SNAP
going
benefits,
away,
you're
the benefits that people, receive because of the pandemic, who maybe didn't receive those benefits before, but now are relying on those benefits because maybe their livelihood did not replenish itself on the other side of the pandemic. Now that we're over it and still need that help, the system was like, hey, we're done. See you later.
I mean, the fact that people are having to put their groceries on credit, that's not becoming of one of the world's wealthiest nations.
In America.
Just saying.
In America.
Yeah.
All right, speaking of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the decline in attendance at historically black Protestant churches in the U.S., with membership dropping to a post-pandemic low of 46%. Now, black Americans have been disproportionately affected by the virus, as we know, and many older congregants are hesitant to attend in-person services, so there's that. And then churches have attempted to reach out virtually, but younger generations are attending church less often. Although virtual attendance has risen, many pastors lament that congregants are no longer attending in person. Despite these challenges, black churches remain fundamental to their communities, providing refuge and hope during times of challenge. And in our morning meeting, this conversation went on for a while about attending black church or not attending, and some of the fallout, some of the distrust that has taken place, the congregants being misled with crazy messages and things of that nature.
I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is just inadequate access to health care, right? A lot of folks, even members of my own family, have been reticent about going back to church in person because, they're not sure if it's safe enough to do so, because there are so many protocols that have now been dropped by the wayside, right? And so there are folks that are saying, well, I got my shots and things, but is that enough? And so it's going to take a minute for people to build their confidence to be back in spaces like that on a regular basis together, especially older adults.
I don't buy it. Listen, just be honest. If you don't want to go to church, you don't want to go to church. But folks are outside. We are at parties. We are on boat rides. We are going to. We are at conventions. We are traveling. The airlines can't even keep up with how much we want to be outside. So, this idea of COVID safety in church, miss me with that. If you don't, if you just don't want to get up on Sunday morning or go in the afternoon, or you don't like the idea of paying tithes, or you don't trust your spiritual leader or your pastors, that's a whole nother conversation. But don't come at me with I don't feel it's safe, because y'all are out here.
I think that may be true. That may be true for younger folks, right? I'm just saying for older folks, I think there is a real concern, around getting together, especially if you go to a megachurch, right? And people that may have had health scares and health issues, right? I think the comfort level isn't there yet. For some, it's not there yet.
Okay.
They're working on it.
Okay. People are out here, all ages, sizes, creeds, colors. We out here. It's just because you don't want to go to church, you don't want to go to church. Be honest. But you out here. Okay, go ahead.
Soulmates, tell her what you really think. Get at her in the comments.
Let's go to Atlanta.
Yes, meanwhile, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens is promoting historic investments in the city's affordable housing.
Yeah, the multi-million-dollar private commitment will help transform housing affordability in the region. Our friends at Fox Atlanta has the story.
a new effort to create affordable housing in Atlanta through a public and philanthropic partnership, an investment of $200 million.
So when we do these group projects together, you see the buildings, but you're about to see the life.
Standing alongside city leaders during the announcement, a woman who knows what it's like to not have a warm and safe place to sleep.
I'm just so emotional because I was out there. And just didn't know what to do.
Tonette Freeman was homeless for close to 20 years before getting a chance to live at Academy Loft Apartments, a unit paid for with affordable housing funds.
Every time I just go out the doors, I smile when I come back. I got a place to come home to. I don't have to be out in the streets no more.
The goal, building and preserving 20,000 affordable housing units by 2026. This investment described as the largest single investment in affordable housing in city history. So where is the money coming from? The Woodruff and Whitehead Foundations donating $100 million, and the City Council will vote on whether to provide an extra $100 million for the effort, paid with municipal bonds. Funds will either build new units or preserve existing public housing units.
Whether in a Adair Park neighborhood or on Moreland Avenue in Reynoldstown or in Cascade or in Buckhead or wherever it's going to be on the east side, the west side, the north side, the south side, with $200 million, we're coming to a neighborhood near you. All right? And to that end,
I love that. You know, how do you tackle homelessness? It's with money. And then the money trickles out into resources. And then you have to take those resources and you have to touch and reach every single person, like they did with the young lady in this particular story here. You know, you got to go one by one and actually follow through and solve the issue. She'll never have to live on the streets again if she, follows all the rules and regulations or whatever, she had to, abide by to get into this position. But that's how you do it, one person at a time. You just don't, scoop all of them up and move them to another side of the city because you got a convention or something's coming to town and you don't want people to see, the sore, the Band-Aid, put the Band-Aid on. It's one at a time, and you completely solve this issue for each and every homeless person.
I mean, this is one of the greatest issues of our time. There are a number of mayors across the country that, were elected to do something about this issue.
Right.
And so the mayor of Atlanta, he hears that, and he is about that business. I mean, constructing 20,000 affordable housing units by 2026, that's not easy to do.
Yeah.
Having $100 million in private investment, getting enough support on the city council for another $100 million municipal bond. This is a part of what the work looks like.
Yeah.
And, when people are unhoused, when people are homeless, that's just one symptom when it comes to poverty, right? So we're really trying to address poverty. Homelessness is one facet of that. We just reported on, a story about people having to, pay as they go when it comes to their groceries. These are all symptoms of poverty. And so don't get it twisted when you see 5% unemployment and you see that the stock market is doing well. This is an indication of whether or not that prosperity is really being spread across the country.
And it's not just one approach, because you have mental illness, you have vets, you have people who just have fallen on hard times, you've got drug issues. So the homelessness pot, if you will, there's a lot of ingredients in there. And that's why I say case by case.
That's right.
Because everybody's going to need something a little different. All right, so up next, the financial future of HBCUs could be in trouble.
That's right. We'll tell you what the numbers say when it comes to funding. Up next, you're watching. Welcome back to FOXSOUL's Black Report. Well, a new study has found HBCUs get donations 178 times lower than Ivy League schools.
Some study participants blame systemic racism for the underfunding. Others said it was a result of limited connections between philanthropists and HBCU leaders. Now, the study conducted by the philanthropic research group Candid and ABFE, a nonprofit that advocates for investments in Black communities, found that the 8 Ivy League schools received $5.5 billion from the 1,000 largest U.S. foundations compared to $45 million for the 99 HBCUs.
That's right. According to the UNCF, the nation's largest private provider of scholarships and other educational support to Black students, HBCUs account for 80% of Black judges, 50% of Black doctors, and 50% of Black lawyers. Studies show that Black HBCU graduates earn $900,000 more in their lifetime than black graduates from predominantly white institutions or black workers without college degrees.
So we know HBCUs work for us. You know, those statistics have been proven. We see the lifestyle. You know, we see, you know, these folks graduating, having fabulous careers. However, there is a downside. There's just not enough money, or, you know, the money is only given to a particular set of popular HBCUs, and as a result, you have these other institutions that are absolutely struggling. It's funny, I just read that Savannah State University, the oldest HBCU in Georgia, their president just resigned over low enrollment. So, you know, we celebrate HBCUs and the culture, and we love what some of these corporations have made good on, but, you know, there are other HBCUs who are suffering.
Yeah, and it's another reminder. I mean, we report very often on federal funding for HBCUs. It's another reminder of why that funding is so important, why it's so important to have somebody in the White House and leaders in Congress that support funding our HBCUs, because without it, can you imagine if we didn't have federal funding for these HBCUs, how much more out of whack that funding formula would be between Ivy Leagues and HBCUs?
Indeed. All right, the MLK Child and Family Wellbeing Center in Watts, California was recently unveiled as the Jacqueline Avant Children and Family Center. A renaming ceremony was held last week with Avant's family. The renamed facility provides mental and physical health for local families and children of South Central LA. Jacqueline Avant, of course, was a philanthropist and a community activist. She was shot and killed on December 1st of 2021 by an intruder who broke into the home near Beverly Hills. She spent much of her time and resources on efforts that benefit at-risk youth at the South Central Community Child Care Center while serving as president of its support groups, Neighbors of Watts.
Now let's head to Queens, New York, where the corner of 112th Road and Guy R. Brewer Boulevard in South Jamaica will now be known as Clifford Glover Road. Clifford Glover was just 10 years old in 1973 when he was shot and killed by a plainclothes police officer in an unmarked car. Thomas Shea and his partner Walter Scott believed Glover and his stepfather had just committed a robbery. Glover was shot in the back, and according to records, Shea said he pointed a weapon at him. Ballistic testing did not support his story, and he was indicted for murder. Shea was later acquitted by a predominantly white jury in 1974.
Wow. All right. Dillard University President Rochelle Ford has announced this year's graduating class will have the honor of hearing from Essence's Caroline Wenga. Wenga is the president and CEO of Essence Ventures, which houses several brands aimed at creating a far-reaching black economic ecosystem. The brands include Essence Communication Inc., Afropunk, BeautyCon, Essence Studios, and the Essence Festival, of course. The Kenyan-born Wanga defines herself as a cultural architect and president. Ford says what she and Essence bring to Dillard's home base of New Orleans has been inspiring. Dillard's commencement ceremony is this month.
Meanwhile, in Tampa Bay, there's a place called the Skills Center that aims to help youth children at risk.
And the nonprofit will now have a new home, all thanks to their leader, who has been working hard to enlarge their territory. Our friends at Fox Tampa has this story.
On a construction tour of a massive new building with a member of Congress. Not bad for an organization that started with no home of its own in 2007.
And 15 years later, this has really come full circle for us, beyond what we could have imagined.
The new 55,000 square foot, $22 million Skills Center Collaborative at 22nd Street, just south of Hillsborough in East Tampa. The Skills Center is a not-for-profit that gets kids in the door through basketball or other sports and then leads them in different directions.
We have to get them on a path to a place where they can make above a livable wage. So that's college, that's full-time employment, that's vocational training, and that's the military.
When finished, renderings show a building that will be packed with teaching areas, from kitchens to classrooms, health and wellness, personal finance.
They are going to focus on giving young people the skills they need to open their own business, become entrepreneurs, and to share in the great success that's the Tampa Bay area.
Castor says the location is a key. While they will serve people from all over the county, here in East Tampa, people haven't been able to fully share in the success of a metro that's been booming.
That's why it's so important to be intentional about going into neighborhoods that haven't had the investment that they've needed.
The new collaborative will also house 4 other nonprofits, bringing 180 new jobs and serving more than 3,000 young people. For Celeste Roberts, success will be measured by results.
To be able to see young people achieve, that's really all you need to fire up to continue to move forward.
Hoping to make the eastern part of town part of Tampa's economic success story.
Yeah, how many cities, do we know that, has that sort of kind of challenge or that kind of lopsided success and renewal, if you will. So it's good to see that the east side of Tampa is now getting their just due.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, that's nothing small. I mean, creating 180 jobs, serving 3,000 youth, right? I mean, part of what we've been talking about, part of what is happening across the country being led by our nation's mayors and other folks is sharing the prosperity, making sure that these ideas that, well, one side of town has the resources and the other side of town is left destitute, this moment, meeting the moment is about really creating more equity. It's really disrupting these disparities that have lingered for far too long.
And I don't mean to be a negative Nancy, but if the thought was all inclusive and you talk about intention, then there would have never been a situation where it was lopsided, where one part of the city is experiencing all this great growth and renewal and the other side is dilapidated and left in despair. If you were thinking more holistically and thinking, that everybody deserved, what growth and renewal and revitalization can bring, then you wouldn't be dealing with a side of the city that has to play catch up. I mean, I'm back at home here in Detroit and I see the same downtown. Great. I don't even recognize downtown Detroit, but has that trickled out into these neighborhoods where you still have some very dedicated city folks, natives who want a safe neighborhood, who want their city services, on point and on time, who take pride in their home and the way their home looks. Have they experienced some of that energy? You got to keep that same. It's a sign on my door, my office door. Keep that same energy.
They got to keep that same energy.
No matter what side of town they live.
You're right, but that racial
especially
bias,
our sides of town,
the racial bias, the racial injustice, the legacies of redlining, and so many other things, they're real, right? And that's a part of why East Tampa has been void of the kind of investment that we're learning about. And so, shout out to all the folks leading the change on the ground in East Tampa, Florida.
And don't leave the folks behind anymore. How about that from this point on?
That's right. That's right. Still ahead, Mattel is looking to be more inclusive in 2023.
We'll have all you need to know about the new Down syndrome Barbies. You're watching FOXSOUL's Black Report.
Welcome back to FOXSOUL's Black Report. Well, the list is out for the new batch of inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I get excited. The class of 2023 features a diverse group of names, including Missy Elliott, homegrown spinners. They're from right here, 8 Mile Road, Royal Oak Township, and Shaka Khan, Chi-Town's very own. Elliott will make history as the first female hip-hop artist to be inducted. The president and CEO of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Foundation says, quote, "What we are always trying to show is that rock and roll is a big tent and a lot of people belong." The ceremony will take place November 3rd at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York.
We love to see it. I'm glad that Missy is getting her due. We have oftentimes reported on the fact that this is the 50th anniversary of hip hop. And so hip hop is a part of that big tent. And I'm glad that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is acknowledging that, along with folks like Shaka Khan.
Long overdue. And and the Spinners. I got a quick story. My dad grew up with the Spinners, and he claims that he was an original member, but he wanted to go off to college, so he let Felipe be the lead of the group. We always been like, okay, right, Dad. But just to have that connection to the Spinners, and I feel like my dad's been gone since '97. I feel like every time I hear a Spinners record, that's my dad saying, hey. But long overdue, for some of these artists. And I want the rock and roll executive to understand that all this music came from us. So whether you call it R&B or rock and roll, we are the tent. Put a degree on that because that's what I studied.
Mic drop.
Evolution of black music.
Mic drop.
I'm just saying. Rihanna is set to play Smurfette. I think this is great in the upcoming Smurfs animated film. Rihanna will also create and perform original music for the film, and she will serve as producer. She's getting all the checks. The pop icon follows Katy Perry, who played Smurfette during the previous Smurfs film franchise. The Smurf movie hits theaters February 14th, Love Day 2025.
That is so awesome, and I'm sure her kids are going to be so excited one day when they get to watch their mom play Smurfette.
And I think it fits because Smurfette has always been a little.
She's always had some sass,
spicy and sassy.
Well, I think Smurfette and also Papa Smurf.
Papa Smurf was a grouch, wasn't he?
No, Papa Smurf. He had those red leotards. Remember the red leotard? Papa Smurf. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to watch the Smurfs. I didn't do too many cartoons.
That was a bad man.
Yeah, I didn't do too many cartoons, but I did do the Smurf. My aunt, Stacy, turned me on to the Smurfs. I was like, okay, I could do this one. Because I couldn't do all the, I was such a grown child, but I could do the Smurfs.
Well, there seems to be inclusivity at Mattel. A Barbie doll with Down syndrome is joining Mattel's lineup. The doll is part of Mattel's Barbie Fashionista line. The company says it represents the different skin tones, body types, and disabilities children see in the world around them. Other recent additions to the line include new Barbie dolls with braces and a Ken doll with a prosthetic leg. Mattel says it worked closely with the National Down Syndrome Society to design the dolls.
All right, all inclusive. I mean, everybody should be, represented. It's taken so long for, companies like Mattel to say, hey, not everybody belongs in this particular lane. Let's discover, open up, or maybe even create some other lanes. So all kids or all people, maybe even, Barbie collectors, would be included in this new movement that Mattel is heading up. Good for them.
It's great, and the fact that they have a doll that has a prosthetic. I mean, that is progress. It
is.
And think about all the kids out there that may have prosthetics themselves. Kids out there that may have Down syndrome themselves. Right? It helps to normalize. The way that kids are in the world. Right?
I wonder how far Mattel is willing to go because me and you we were sitting here off camera thinking of some other lanes that they could create and or open up. With when you talk about diversity and being all inclusive. So we'll see what Mattel continues to come up with. For sure.
That's right. Who knows? Maybe there might be a Courtney doll.
It could be, or Nicorda doll. All right. Jamie Foxx remains hospitalized following his medical emergency more than 3 weeks ago. His exact condition is still being kept secret by his family, but they're urging fans to pray for the actor's well-being since being hospitalized. Numerous productions involving Foxx have continued on without him. The actor won't be in the upcoming season of Beat Shazam, which starts filming today with a new host, and the film Back in Action will continue to use his stunt double to fill in. Matter of fact, his daughter is his co-host on that Beat Shazam, and I think she was the one who initially put out the, hey, something happened with my dad, but he's recovering, please pray. And then as these days went on, everybody was like, this feels different, this feels heavier, this feels really, really serious. And then you saw a lot of folks in that circle, pleading for our prayers and our thoughts. So, the streets talk, and I'm just hoping for the best.
Yeah, and while we're praying for Jamie, we got to make sure we're also praying for his daughter, Corinne, because she is carrying the weight of this, and she is carrying it well. And so, shout out to her. So many of us are thinking about their entire family.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, up next, it's our favorite part of the show, Black Excellence.
Dun, 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 dun. Join us as we wish one of the first Black Marines a happy birthday. Soulmates, we'll be right back. You're watching FOXSOUL's Black Report. There he is, Mr. Handsome.
Welcome back to FOXSOUL's Black Report. He is one of the first Black men to ever serve as a Marine in the U.S. military, and he's celebrating his 100th birthday right here in Detroit, Michigan.
World War II veteran Lee Newby Jr. celebrating a century of life. Fox 2's Hillary Golston has his story.
Happy birthday to you. Lee Newby Jr., 100 years old.
He looks good. To see him today still standing, still walking, looking good, because my grandmother always told me, you know, good black don't crack, and this brother looks amazing.
Becoming a centenarian is no small feat, and if you get to that stage of life, you want to look back and say, I've lived it well. And Mr. Newby has. A history maker, one of the first black Marines in the United States.
Me being a Marine, too, and serving in the Marine Corps, that definitely means a lot to me. But also, we don't always get these opportunities to honor people while they're still alive for the work that they've done.
That's over 3.67 billion beats that's come out of his body. 3.67 beats, okay, over his lifetime.
How do you measure a life like this? Newby's son literally counting every beat of his father's heart, still going strong after ups and downs, trials and tribulations, triumphs and loss.
You got to get on your knees and you got to ask for strength. Yeah. You have to ask for the strength of God to say, look, we're going to overcome. And we're going to get there. And I know that's what's kept this man for 100 years. I know that for sure. I give honor to my father, and I'm so grateful to God for all that he's done. And I know I've been talking. I know I told these stories, but Daddy, I love you so much. I love what all is happening here today. This will definitely stay in all of our hearts for the rest of our lives together.
A man who deserves our recognition and our respect.
I really have had some tough times, but through it all, you know, through it all. Yes, sir. We're still traveling.
Bravo.
Amazing.
Bravo.
First of all, he looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and reading a little bit more into the story, he was enlisted at 19 in the early 1940s. He served until the mid 1940s. He went on to marry in the early 1960s. Unfortunately, lost his wife early 90s, but has persevered. And the son that you saw there talking, he also has a great professional career, but he served as his father did as well. So.
We salute you, Lee Newby Jr. We sure do.
Indeed. For the full run on today's stories and more, you can access FOXSOUL's video on demand on any of our partners, and make sure you download the FOXSOUL app, Soulmates, because it is free. What a wonderful show today. Appreciate you for joining us. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte. On behalf of the entire team here at FOXSOUL's Black Report, stay lifted.
And stay safe.